This is Judge Joe Brown, and you're watching We All Be News TV, the
News Free Dixie.
news free Dixie for the 21st century.
Hello, Judge. Are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
That's excellent. We all be is honored to have on once again the most honorable, truly beyond category Judge Joe Brown, giving us his point of view on the world today and what the hell is really going on. In so many words, how you doing today, Judge?
All right, young man, I'm doing fine.
That's good. I just want
in the house again.
Yes, sir. It's an honor to have you. I know people have really enjoyed the last episode we did concerning the OJ parole and your thoughts among other things. People really appreciate that wisdom that you give out to us now, and more than ever in times like these. And I just want to ask you, being you're from California, you're from L.A., and now they're pushing in 2020 the candidacy of Kamala Harris, the U.S. Senator from California, to become possibly the first woman president. What are your thoughts about that?
Absolutely ridiculous. Right now, let's face it, you're either going to get Trump for another 4 years or you're going to run Bernie Sanders. And that's the beginning and the end of the equation. Bernie Sanders in 2020. They'll have to start kicking things in motion within about 11 months, and the Democratic Party would be lost of mind if they waste time on anything else other than trying to get firmly behind Bernie Sanders. Perhaps an Al Gore. But Kamala Harris is just another neophyte, and we had 8 years of a neophyte who did not know how to get anything done. And this man that you've got in there right now, even if you don't like what he's doing, he's playing Energizer Bunny so you can see what energy can do. Now, I'm a little perturbed about Kamala Harris's qualifications. And what I am perturbed about is her status as a career prosecutor. I tell you this based on public, you trust me. I'll tell you this as a former criminal court judge. I do not trust career prosecutors. If you have been a prosecutor, but you have been something else for a part of your professional career, a significant part of it, okay. If all you've been is a prosecutor, no. And the reason is this old saw about power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And people who have been career prosecutors have exercised too much power for too long and have become corrupt. Almost invariably, not completely, but almost completely. And her career is a lifetime career prosecutor who became Attorney General prosecutor for the state of California, then senator. She hasn't been in there 2 years yet. And again, we will be looking at a rookie. So if anybody in the Democratic Party has got any kind of bloody sense, they need to get firmly behind Bernie Sanders right now. That superdelegate thing was put in place to get Hillary Clinton in there. She was probably the worst candidate that they could have picked, for the time that they ran her. And this is caught up with something else I don't like, which is let's get a woman just to get a woman. We've got radical feminists and not so radical ones, too, that push that, and that's not a good idea. That obscures the big picture on what is this individual going to be able to do with our situation and make it better. Now, we got Barack Obama, who was a young man who did not grow up in continental United States of America. He has no foundation, no aunts, uncles, brothers, and sisters daddy, granddaddy, who had the Black American experience. And for 8 years, we got absolutely nothing done. I hate to say this, but looking back, I would say we got more as a people under the last Bush administration, under the previous Clinton administration, under the Bush administration before that, under the Carter administration, even under the Nixon administration, definitely under the Johnson administration. And probably the only American president who's done as little for black people as Barack Obama was Saint Ron the Reagan. And I hate to say that. So that's just this, be careful what you ask for. We had the great Thurgood Marshall in there who dedicated his life toward advancing the people. And when he retired, they asked him, did he know who his successor was likely to be? Apparently, he knew it was going to be Clarence Thomas. And with due respect to the holder of that office on the Supreme Court, Marshall said, but I gotta tell you, a black snake will bite you just as quick as a white one. He had a gravelly voice, and that's what he said. So we don't need a woman just to have a woman. We need a qualified, effective individual who knows how to work things, who knows how to twist arms, who has the courage to actually be about the people rather than simply fronting the people off because they've got another agenda that they don't want us to see. Now, that agenda is the same one, whether it's Cruz, Rubio, whether it is McCain, whether it's Hillary Clinton, whether it is Donald Trump, and it's got to do with high finance and big energy. And it's not us. Somebody needs to get in there about us. And we need justice as a people, not a situation where it is just us. And I have a sneaking suspicion, looking at her lifetime career, that that is exactly what we would be getting from a Kamala Harris. Now, I noticed, for example, one of the biggest businessman shysters in California that got really jacked up and should have been proceeded against in a civil action by the Attorney General's office. She gave him a pass. She's got a history of giving passes to big business, high finance, and those who make a lot of money off of us. And if you want to find out what somebody is all about, look to see where the money comes from. And by the way, that's interesting. Trump basically financed his own campaign, so there was nothing to look at. But if you looked at Hillary, you saw the money that went to her was the same money that went to George W. Bush, the same that went to Barack Obama, the same that went to her husband in his last run for the presidency, which was his second term. And that is high finance and big oil. So they have not done us any good. The gap between the very, very rich and the ordinary person has gotten greater and greater and greater. And the United States is more of a classed country than Great Britain is. Now, another thing I don't like about what Harris is doing is this thing that she complained about in her interactions with her colleagues. And she said, my male colleagues shushed me. Women, you need to stand behind me so we can get woman power. Look, what in the world has that got to do with representing the constituency of California? She's always coming on women, but she always has got something to say about advancing women's rights, but she never says anything about the rights of the people of California or the rights of the people of this country. Right now, she's off on this big tear about black women getting less money than white men in the workplace. But she's completely forgotten about the fact that black men who are nominally supposed to be heads of households are not getting any jobs at all, or they're in the penitentiary.
Mm.
And she put too many of them in the penitentiary running around la-da-da without any reform programs to get these young brothers in California or Los Angeles squared away, but just locking them up and coasting to political victories on I was tough and lock them up. You can be tough on people, but you have to be constructively tough and make some choices about the social engineering you do to make it better instead of just warehousing the problems. And that's another point. We've got a thing going on in our country right now that's kind of absurd. Most of us in my generation took Boys and Girls 101A. And Boys and Girls 101A was kind of teaching what's been going on for eons within the human race. It's like, how do men and women court each other? What do men do when they properly court women? And what do women do when they try to induce the men to court them? It's called mammal reproduction. We have courting rituals. But nowadays, you can't talk to a woman on the job because that may be sexual harassment. You go to a bar and you're likely to run into a crazy. You go to a church and you've got a skewed situation there. And you find there are no places that boys and girls can meet each other. So you have all of these dating sites and services that are run online, which are kind of crazy. You look at a woman and she looks attractive, and nowadays somebody who is a feminist and does not like men to begin with, part of the LGBTQ thing, says that you are being offensive. The women don't have an assurance that what they think is a male is actually somebody that's got a heterosexual male's interest, nor that he's been raised with an understanding of Boys and Girls 101A, so they don't know what they're getting. You've got this new thing where it's called body shaming. If you've got a bad-looking person who's way out of shape, that's supposed to be okay, but it's not appetizing nor appealing to most men. But the thing is it's not supposed to be about being attractive to men. It's supposed to be comfortable with yourself. And again, that's part of the courtship ritual of humans. It's been going back for I don't know how long, and it's girl looks good to boy, boy gets attracted to girl, girl is looking back at boy. Does boy have what it takes for her to get together with him? Can she do better with him than without him? Is he willing to sacrifice and do a lot for her, take her home, and set up a family? And nowadays, you're supposed to be told, no, it doesn't work that way. But it has worked that way to the point of getting people on this planet to the point we are now, but some folk don't like it. Now, when you start disrupting this thing about courtship rituals that are human courtship rituals, you get problems. There is another one that is a strange one that I have become aware of, and that is a group of about 200 plus studies that have been done over the last 40 years. At first, scientists were saying these studies are not all valid because they took too select a group. This isn't a valid statistical sample or something's wrong with it. But then they started getting into looking at these studies, and they were shocked to discover that they all had the same result. In North America, Australia, New Zealand, and in Europe, they are noticing amongst all of the ethnic groups that live in those places, whether it's Australian, Aboriginal, Native American, Asian American, you get the typical European, you get somebody from Jamaica who lives over in England or whatever it may be. For the males, there appears to be a 42% reduction in sperm count. And if that keeps up, it could be something that could lead to the extinction of the human race. Now, the causality is not quite clear, and they suspect it may have something to do with pollution in the environment. We had a problem with eagles and condor and such like, and other predatory birds not being able to breed or rear young because the DDT was keeping their eggs from forming right. Well, apparently something in our environment is keeping the sperm count depressed amongst males of all ethnicities in America, Australia, Europe, and New Zealand. And that's not good. But these things about altering the way Boys and Girls 101 works is not good either, because we've got all sorts of little clamorings from people who are not interested in traditional reproduction that has a great deal to do with the environment faced by those who are. Women's rights are important. Men's rights are important also. As you and I have discussed, Brother Hurd, for the last 45 years, every year we have a Take Your Daughter to Work week. We've never had one that's Take Your Son to Work week, and nowadays statistics show that only 28% of each year's high school graduates over the last 20 years have been male. Only 32% of the college undergraduates are male, and only 36% of the grad students are male, and only 44% of the workforce is male. Now, you've got stupid fools out there who want to say that's because boys have gotten caught up in video games, so they don't go to school and don't go look for jobs. But I would submit to you that the true basis for that is 42% of the Americans who are 35 and younger are illegitimate. They've been born out of wedlock because there are too many young women who have listened to this feminist nonsense and don't think they need to get married before they have children. And that's depriving these boys of the right to have man training. Now, I was bemused to note some troll who jumped into the midst of the thread. It was talking about manpower, man up, men need to do this, that, and the other. And she wanted to scoff and say, what's man training? Never heard of it. And she put some cartoon out there from Walt Disney's animated, I think it was The Lion King, two little cubs going please about something, and that's the way she wanted to look at man training. And the whole idea of men being men was something that she and some other feminist trolls were trying to scoff at. But real women know that's not right. Real men know that's not right. And we have a problem with what the ones who are marginal are doing to the next generation. Physiologically, in psychology, the human child is almost totally responsive to the human female until it gets 7, going on 8. So responsible mothers put in the young child's head, if it is a boy child, about manhood things. You have to become a man. You must be a man. Act like a man. And when they get 8, they start paying attention to the male parent or the male figure who stands in for the parent, and they get their man training. Or if they're girls, they learn how to interact with men so that as they grow up, their early proclivity to play house. So when they get 16 and 17, they're familiar with the concept, even though they're no more mature than the boys. But the boys have been doing stuff that they've been directed to that is manly. And then they have to get used to the idea of playing house. But between that girl thing and that boy thing, you get the yin yang balance that develops, and you get families that are stable that can raise the next generation of children. We don't have that so much anymore. And 42% of the Americans, and this is irrespective of race nor ethnicity, I'm not just talking about black folks, are born out of wedlock. So that is not a good thing. That is becoming reflected in some dysfunctionality that you see today. And then we have a lack of common sense. One of the ones that gets me is you walk down the street, you're a woman, you've got some curves, you are not one that is being protected by, what is this, nobody shaming. You can be 200 pounds overweight, but nobody's supposed to tell you that you need to do better. And they look good, but they've got on some tight booty shorts with everything hanging out at the bottom, and a little bitty halter with everything trying to bounce out of the top. And they walk through the streets and somebody goes after them. Well, of course, nobody's supposed to go after them. But that is the same thing as you've got money in your pocket. You're walking down the street to your car with a few $100s in your pocket, and you're in the wrong area. Do you pull the 200 out, hold it? Hey, man, look at here what I got. Let me flash my cash. You're going to get hijacked and robbed. And that's against the law. That's a crime. It's against the law to rape a woman or to sexually molest or assault a woman. But if she walks down the street in the wrong place with the goodies showing, that's just like flashing a big roll of money in the wrong place. You see, that just reflects a lack of common sense sometimes. So we have to get back to the basics. You know, the world's a dangerous place. You can get drought, and we're looking at that coming up because of climatic change. We can get hit by an asteroid, and scientists tell us it's overdue. We can get solar flares. That's the problem that you have nothing you can do about. You may get the magnetic pole flipping. It happens quite often, and it's due to do it again. You've got possible disruption with our reliance upon electronic devices that can come from something not beyond our control, that can come from something beyond our control or something that's within our control. All kinds of things can go wrong. Somewhere in this equation of international politics and diplomacy, somebody can lose their minds and we can have a disaster. So we need to do something about keeping ourselves able to deal with adversity and emergency. But we don't. Now, let me stop. Maybe you got something you want to throw at me, but I guess I sort of wound down with that.
Well, all this stuff is appreciated, Judge. I actually had a couple of things I was thinking about. We was talking about Kamala Harris' possibility for running for president in 2020. So you don't feel that, I know the question of, I know ageism is real, but you don't feel that Bernie Sanders will be too old to run for president in 2020?
He seems in good enough health right now. Do you think he'll be in less health in 11 months? Trump's 70 something. Hillary will be 70 in another month.
That's true. Yeah.
He'll be 2 years older than Trump, 3 years older than Trump. He's doing okay. Look at that decrepit, halfway mummified Ronald Reagan, who's probably done more evil for the country and our race in particular than anybody I can think of in my lifetime. But they make a saint out of him, and nobody paid attention because he was part of that Hollywood crowd, so the media doesn't touch him. For what it's worth, some people hate Trump, but if I was an African American with sense, which I am, I wouldn't get so mad at him. He's just letting us see some stuff that's been there for a while that's been glossed over. Like I told you earlier, imagine this lake, and it's winter, and the lake is frozen over with ice, and there's snow on it, and there's snow on the ground, and you've got all of these pretty trees and everything, and a few people have gone out to ice skate on the lightly frosted over lake, well, light snowfall over the frozen lake. But under this sheet of ice is some very foul pollution. And what you get with Trump is like he's a piece of hot iron that's melted a hole in this ice so you can smell that foul odor that comes from that corrupt, polluted water under this nice, pretty ice. You see, we haven't gotten to springtime yet where that ice will thaw and it'll really be bad, but we need to do something about changing the conditions in that lake so when that ice thaws and that water is open to the air, it won't be so polluted. But he lets us see what's under there.
Yes, sir.
For whatever it's worth.
Also, I want to ask you about another politician, another black woman from California, MaxINe Waters, the congresswoman from California who's been in the news with her thing about reclaiming her time, among other things. She's been an outspoken advocate of Donald Trump. But I asked people recently, what has she really done for black folks with her career in terms of empowering black people or do anything for black folks? I know she voted no against the crime bill back in 1994, but what has she really done in terms of her legacy to serve and help black people?
I can't tell you. In my personal opinion, we don't have any national black leadership. None at all. Minister Farrakhan has gotten a bit too old, and he's been one of the leaders, but, he's getting tired and, he's got a legacy. Jesse Jackson is certainly not it. He's reached his crescendo and he's on the wane like Minister Farrakhan. We don't have any athletes that are out there like Muhammad Ali, but he never was that kind of leader.
You don't think Kaepernick or Kaepernick, you don't think he fits the bill for that athlete, like how he's been blackballed from the NFL?
Well, yeah, but athletes these days, they aren't really the leadership for Black America that they used to be. They actually are more distractions. In other words, son, instead of paying attention to your grades so you can become a black doctor, lawyer, engine, chief, businessman, or whatever it may be, you're worried about playing basketball. You see, so our ideation is no longer about those things that make us the talented 10th when we have what it takes to bootstrap up the race like Du Bois talked about. We all want to play basketball. And you can't be a Michael Jordan, a Magic Johnson, a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You can't be these things likely. And then the three I named, by the way, they're businessmen, or in the case of Abdul-Jabbar, the great center, he's a scholar and he writes books. Or Shaq is a part-time cop, detective. He does community work and a lot of stuff like that, and he's a businessman too. See, what are you going to do? So we need leadership, and we don't have it on the national level. What we do have is some that are unseeming. They try to rationalize their lifetime of compromise between I want to give the appearance I'm doing something for my people, but not really, because I don't want to affect my white overlords the wrong way and they'll block me, that kind of thing.
Mm.
So we lack that.
Yeah, that sounds a
We
lot.
don't have
Yeah.
many on the local level because too many of them are victimized by hacked and corrupted voting machines. And by the way, all this stuff about the Russians hacking the election, that's nonsense. But there is hacking of election machines. It's just going on locally and has been for the last 2 decades. And in very few regions have there been honest elections. So such black power as is apparent has been greatly diluted because of that. Or you got a situation like Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee, where the Justice Department declared that this juvenile court was one of the most racist and corrupt institutions it had ever encountered. In fact, not one of they denoted it as the most corrupt and racist they'd ever encountered. And this is a majority black county, yet we've got Boss Hogg down there at juvenile court decided to take it out from under the federal edict so they could get more about their racist business of exploiting black people, making money off of them, and also oppressing poor whites as well. See, they're in the same boat we're in to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. And the mayor goes on. We've got a white mayor, and, who does he represent? Not us. We've got a city council that's supposed to be majority black, but they gave away the Board of Education. We've got a Board of Education that uses its power and position right now where minorities, students, and by that I don't mean black ones, minority students have much higher representation on the county Board of Education than do the majority of the students. And it's getting skewed. We've got a situation where in 2 decades, the United States of America will no longer be a majority white country. We've got several years in the past where births of persons of color exceeded those of persons of white status. So we've got some dynamics that are shifting around, but as far as we as a people, black people are concerned, we don't have any local black leadership that is not badly compromised by either freak sexual activity, petty theft, or beholden to the wrong persons. There are a few exceptions, but not nearly enough. Mm-hmm. We've lost out on black judgeships over the last 20 years, particularly in this area. We have a few black jurists around the country who are trying to do something in terms of constructive social engineering, but they're getting smacked down by disciplinary boards that are dominated by white rural Tea Party type interests. And we've got a big problem. We had homeboy, well, I don't want to call him homeboy, I'd say quasi homeboy in for 8 years, but he didn't do anything for us. Did a lot for the gay population. That's their advantage. I mean, they're citizens too, but he didn't do anything for us. And then nowadays, Black Lives Matter has been co-opted by the LGBTQ thing and the feminists who look at it as a device to advance their causes. We have a situation where the LGBT crowd is trying to identify with us and say our interests are caught up with theirs, but where they dictate what we need is a bad thing for us because our needs are not the same. We don't need households run by single women. We have too many of those already. We need home places where there are traditional families again, and that's becoming an endangered situation. So we've got all kinds of things going wrong right now. We need to be restored to perceiving that we have a culture. We need a bit more of this I'm black and I'm proud, and we don't find that. Malcolm X said years ago, a processed head equals a processed mind. And we see boys wearing braids, which in Africa is a sign that you are in the LGBT crowd. Dreadlocks are fine, but the boys are put in braids as little boys by their mothers who know no better. And the mothers have 10, 12, 15 pounds of weave in their head, all sorts of rainbow colors. And, they weigh 200 pounds more than they're supposed to, which is very bad for their health. But we've got this national thing about you can't body shame anybody, and that's okay. So we've got a lot of chaos. We've got guys who walk around and they switch and they twitch, and even if they don't go LGBTQ, they aren't exactly manly when they get an education. They find all sorts of excuses as to why they are exempt from making a stand and saying, this line shall not be crossed. And in fact, we're going to push those things that need to be pushed back across the other side of this line. But we don't have that, see. We have let the teachers, the police, and the parents take care of bullies instead of the boys learning how to cope with that. We have abject fear of some monster running amok on a playground or playing postal at the job place because we think we can be protected by suppressing masculinity when that's the worst thing you can do. You need to make boys very familiar with masculinity and masculine principles because it stays there. It's a beast that's the apex predator on the planet. And if you don't tend to it, it jumps out at you and you don't know it. You're not familiar with it when you least expect it. And then somebody goes postal, somebody shoots up a playground full of kids, and it gets real crazy. So I think right now this country is going about as wrong as it can go wrong. And it's on a downhill slide from here on out unless it's going to arrest its slide. And you might as well start taking Mandarin Chinese if you're a smart person, because I think they'll be running the world in a couple of decades or so. And meanwhile, black people, we need to start making some coalitions with other minorities. The Hispanics look like they're going to be the largest ethnic group in the country in a short while. We need to start making common cause with them. Native Americans have always been there, willing to be allies when we deserve it. There are the Asians, and we need to make common cause. The poor whites are getting victimized, and we need to be in common cause with them too. But, some people just want a female for a president, a female for a governor, and without concern with whether that person would actually be able to accomplish anything for the people other than just being there, they're being pushed. And the right ones are not being pushed either. So we need to find somebody effective, get behind whoever that is, whatever that is, and push them. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm a Bernie Sanders man. I would support a Colin Powell for president, even though he's a Republican. I would support an Al Gore for president. I would not support a Joe Biden. I would not support a Kamala Harris. I would not support a Nancy Pelosi. I would not support a Feinstein. And incidentally, they represent what is an anathema to a large part of the country that would be up in arms supporting zealously whatever's running against them. And at this rate, I think we're going to have Trump for 2 terms unless we get behind Bernie Sanders.
Wow. That's a lot to take in and think about, Judge, as it relates to that. Um, what does it say about the Democratic Party right now? Like the midterms are coming up within a year time. What does it say about the Democratic Party when there's no new young rising people to be considered for leadership positions?
Well, let's say this. What applies to the Democratic Party also applies to the Republican Party.
Mm.
The Republican Party and the Democratic Party have a dearth of leadership. And they say something about the American system abroad, and we say it about ourselves, but not recently. And that is, with a system like ours, we get the representation we deserve. I don't think the young people are putting enough into those things that properly prepare leaders. I really don't. A lot of stuff that is needed and necessary used to be taught in public schools, but now public schools are going the way of last winter. And what's being taught in them is not what should be taught. So we have a bad problem. And I don't think it's necessarily the young people that are going to make the leaders. I think we need to start looking at people who are mature, 45, 50, 55 or so, for our leaders. Young people need to watch, learn, and prepare. But we need some who have the energy and the knowledge and the experience to start assuming leadership roles, or to, so to speak, come out from behind whatever wall they've been behind and start pushing a little harder. I don't know. I think what is necessary is for someone to rise on his or her own merits rather than getting seized upon, groomed, presented, and pushed. Leadership should be able to lead, and we need leaders to develop themselves, push themselves, and establish themselves. We who can teach should teach, and somewhere out there we need somebody who can lead to rise to the top and lead.
What's your thoughts about? I know we talked about man and women roles in society. We touched upon that a lot in our conversations. What are your thoughts about when people were up in arms about the Donald Trump supposed ban on transgender people in the military? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, it's like this. I look at what's happening is, as we have an all-volunteer professional military now. We don't have a draft. We have some manpower needs. Whoops, why did I say manpower? I guess I shouldn't have said it that way. I guess I was politically incorrect. But let's put ourselves in a position that I'm sure some of these young people in the military find themselves in. You, being a professional, are called upon to be on tour. You're overseas. If you're in the Middle East and you start trying to fraternize with a member of the opposite sex who's a local, you'll wind up in Leavenworth Penitentiary. If you try to fraternize with a female who is an American female and you're a guy, you might wind up in the brig or stockade or disciplined. Now, You've been over there 9 months, 10 months. You have a need that has not been satisfied in a while. Your Jones is coming down on you. You know, your nature is calling on you. And transferring in laterally is a new member of the unit. Everybody's funky and goes in to take a shower, gets soaked down, and you find out that this new guy that came into the unit is not a guy, but it's a gal who has decided that she wants to be a man. Now there you are, there is a soaked down, wet, naked woman, and you haven't seen one for 11 months. And your nature is coming down on you. Now I know you're supposed to maintain your cool, but that's a hell of a thing to throw up in somebody's face. Don't you think that's testing boys and girls 101A to the extreme?
It sounds like it.
Now, just think about that. Or on the other thing, you know, our vehicles are getting old and they're breaking down. And let's say a Bradley is supposed to handle the fire team. That's 6 men, half of the squad. So to squeeze them in better, they've taken the seats out and they put in these webbing benches and everybody's all squeezed together. You're hot and funky. And somebody's sitting in on your lap because you had to get everybody out there. So instead of 6 people plus the crew, you got 10 back there in the back of the Bradley. And you got to sit on somebody's lap and he's getting a hard on because you're turning him on. That could be a little bit distracting and bad for morale, don't you think?
It sounds like it the way you said. I mean, you set the picture.
Or let's put it this way. You like girls and you're over there and you haven't been able to get near one to sniff on it for a while. And that's all you can think about. But there are some of the LGBTQ type who are embedded in the unit, and you can hear them getting it on and moaning, and they have embedded sex, but you're high and dry. You think that's fair?
They get some interesting
How does
cases.
that work for morale? But of course, you know, the sex drive, which is the strongest one they have, that's supposed to go by the wayside. If you're straight. Now, I mean, those are just considerations. I mean, I don't have to worry about it. I'm way too old. In my day, you had to worry about getting one of those notices that says you're 2A and then get another one that says report to your draft board.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Maybe these young people can handle it better than we could have then.
I remember just look at some statistics in the last few years that the cases of rape and sexual assault is very high in the military. Like they're saying one out of every 3 females were raped or sexually assaulted in the military at one point, one out of every 5 males. So we do have, situations where, the military didn't talk about this for years. It was, kept undercover. People didn't really talk about it, but now it's better known. So we do have these issues of people not being able to control their sexual urges. But do you think it's right for people to be banned because of their sexual, I guess, I don't know what to call it, being transgendered? Like, you think they should be banned if they're willing to serve?
Now, let's synthesize what I just got through saying.
Mm-hmm.
If you're straight and you agree to serve and you get shipped overseas, what are you agreeing to give up?
Your liberty, your freedom.
What else in particular? What are you giving up?
Your individuality.
No, you're being able to satisfy your sexuality.
Yes, sir.
So if you're willing to give up your sexuality, then this whole thing about being transgender becomes a red herring.
Mm.
In other words, why in the world does your sexuality have to come into it? And why do you have to have this thing where I got to be able to exercise my sexuality because I happen to be of a peculiar orientation?
Mm. I hear. I definitely hear what you're saying. So they should. They
You
should.
know what I just said?
Yes, sir. I hear what you said.
You get in the military. You're out on maneuvers. You can't have sex that week. But if you were a kid my age back in the 60s and you were in college, you got free sex, all these women running around with no bras, see-through, walking around campus topless because the boys were on a warm day. You could get laid in a minute's notice, but if you were in the military, you couldn't do it.
Mm.
That's part of being in the military. Your old lady's at home, and you're worrying about Jody coming through and taking her, and she's gone. You know, you're looking forward to leave so you can do what you do on leave. You got to give up your sexuality when you get into the military. So why in the world do they have a policy where they're going to let a peculiar exercise of sexuality be the controlling essence of what you're all about?
Yes, sir. It makes a.
What you see? What it? You know? Don't ask, don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
You may be gay, but since everybody the straights got to give up sex, why do you get to play with it? You know, you're hetero. You don't have girls in your unit. You got a bunch of boys, so you don't have sex. You wait till you go on leave. But if you are a boy who likes boys, you got a lot of boys to play with, you know, and that's disruptive. That's why, you know, they used to have this thing of keeping the camp followers away from the soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
It's distracting.
But you know, like you think about what you're saying. Truth be told, they've always been engaged in the military, but you know, it was not about join the military not to showcase your sexuality, but to do a job for your country or whatever.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, keep your mouth shut about what you're thinking about.
But what, like, okay, you have a sex change or whatever, quote unquote sex change. You don't think that's a distraction? I mean, you think a person can have a right to serve, but they enlisted as a man, but end up becoming a woman? Can they still serve their country?
How do they support the military?
How do they support the military?
Tax dollars.
Mm.
You want your tax dollars paid for that?
Oh man, because that's really like that's your personal decision to want to transform from a man to a woman. Supposedly.
Yeah. So why should the military be paying for that? They have enough problems buying new weapons. The M4s are wearing out. The M2s, the 50 cal machine guns. In another 11 months, do you know they will have been in military service for 100 years? And they need money for those.
Mm. All this stuff is
military, what's the military more likely to benefit from? A 50 cal Mardus machine gun or somebody's sex change operation?
Well, that's something to ponder. I know people gonna have a lot to say in the comment sections and stuff like that as usual. I know you can get a lot of feedback on Twitter.
I know they aren't, but you see, this is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
This is the problem. I don't care. Gays have their right to do whatever in the devil they want to do. If trannies want to get an operation, they have a right to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But this is about some business. This is not something personal. And the point of the exercise is if you got drafted, you might have all sorts of things you wanted to do other than getting drafted. but because the country's interests were perceived as being paramount, your interest personally became secondary to that big picture. You see, I say it all the time. Even the military has the wrong slogan. It's be all you can be. That's wrong. It's be all you should be.
Be all
See
you
the
should
difference?
be. Yes, sir.
Like you have rights. I can go in someplace and the First Amendment says now, the way it's interpreted now, I can cuss, holler, and really cut up and say all kinds of foul stuff. But I shouldn't, because I should be polite. So we are into this hedonistic phase where the rights of the many, or the interests of the many, must always be sacrificed because of the peculiar interest of the very few. The very few have those rights, but the rights should be exercised without impinging on the interest of the many. You know, just if you want to fly an airplane, okay. But what if you can't see? You can't fly the airplane. You got to have a certain standard of vision to get a driver's license. If you can't see well enough, it isn't safe for you to operate a car. See, somewhere in here, it gets a little crazy. For example, it's supposed to be all about love, so you can marry whatever you want to marry because of the gender doesn't matter anymore, right? Well, let's supposing you've got two gay siblings. Can they get married, or is that incest?
Whoa, throwing a monkey wrench, Judge. You just messing people's minds up with this.
Think about it. It ain't about procreation anymore. It's about love. So why can't these two gay sisters get married? Why can't these two gay brothers get married? That's not incest?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Judge.
But is that incest?
Yeah, that's incest. Yeah, definitely.
But it doesn't have anything to do with reproduction, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, sir. And also, marriage ain't always been about love either, though. That's the thing.
I'm going somewhere. I'm going somewhere with this.
Okay,
so the long-standing principle of the law is if the reason for the law ceases to exist, so much application of the law.
That's right.
In other words, if you are a gay sibling, there's nothing wrong with you marrying somebody of the same sex who's one of your siblings, because you can't reproduce, so you don't have to worry about having defective children from inbreeding, right?
That's it.
So, two brothers who are gay, even though they're siblings, they can get married, right?
Yes, sir.
Two sisters who are siblings can get married because they're gay, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, now what about a hetero sicko who says, I want to marry my sister. I think I'm a pharaoh. What about him?
Yeah.
Can he get married now to his sister?
Well, I guess so.
No, yeah, that's called equal protection, right? But there is still this pragmatic thing about incest that's there, is it not?
Yes, sir.
So how do you resolve those? You got a problem, don't you?
Yeah, like a King Solomon problem.
Reality jumped right in the middle of the whole thing. Gays got a right to get married because it's about love. So if it's about love, then you can't say they can't get married just because they're siblings. But if you let gay siblings get married, then that's violation of the equal protection rules when it comes to heterosexual siblings.
Yes, sir.
But then there's a pragmatic thing, so that means you're going to have an exception, won't you?
Yep.
Otherwise, you get a bunch of screwed up inbred babies.
Yeah. Man, it's an interesting rabbit hole we're going down with this
Now,
marriage
in
stuff.
other words, the big picture that I'm trying to make is that there are other considerations. And quite frankly, I feel for the gay community. But my perspective is right now, for my whole lifetime, I've been worried about the black community. And my life is getting a lot closer to the end than it has been to the beginning for a long time. So, frankly, I think right now my focus is going to be on black folk getting their stuff together and getting rights for our people. And Donald Trump is what he is. He's the commander in chief. He did what he did. And it's about the fighting efficiency of the military. If the straight military gets deprived of their sexuality when they're on duty, on assignment, on a posting abroad, on a tour, so can everybody else.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
I hear what you're saying.